Aloha.
What's up, buddy? How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Turns out I wasn't following you. I can't talk to you.
There you go. That's the rules, right?
That's the rules. Hey, you're at 90 degrees. Do you want me to
Yeah, I
call
can
you
do
back?
that. Nope, I can
Yeah.
do that.
Oh, there you go. Perfect. So whose swings you got up on the wall there?
Oh man, I got just all the old Golf Digest stuff. The kind of the classic stuff you would see. I got some Tiger in here. I've got some Stuart Appleby, Ernie Els. I've got a
Oh,
little bit
cool.
of Nick Price. Um,
Nice.
some of the old guys I used to kind of follow their stuff. So is that better?
And you know what's not in everybody's teaching office or studio
Tell
is
me,
a
anatomy chart.
picture of the anatomy.
Yeah, that's
Yes, you're my man. I like it. So,
yeah. If
the reason I thought to do this was because I played golf with a guy the other day, and he's like, "How do you guys even get trained?" Like, it's such the way he said it is like, "Is there even a formal system for learning how to teach golf?" Right? And I'm like, "Well," and one of the things I believe is that because we are teaching humans to move differently, number one, so we have to understand the machine we're trying to operate with, and number two, we're asking them to learn motion, which I think the motor learning field has got a long way to go within golf. So that's why I was impressed because I actually answered that question the other day.
Yeah, I think ultimately it's all about movement, right? I mean, we're talking about being able to move and then pick up an implement and strike it and make it respond the way we want to. So if you can't, if it's really simply about trying to understand movement. What drives it? How do you alter it? How do you acquire skills? And then how do you take those into some sort of environment and do something with them? So.
Yeah, so you mean it's not just some really cool looking positions?
No, I think the positions are interesting. Those moments are always, things we've looked at for a long, long time. As soon as we were able to get a camera that was good enough to capture a swing, we began, looking at it from that perspective. I think prior to that, they probably looked at it was all movement, right? It was just,
Yeah, yeah,
but it
yeah.
wasn't until we had tools that we could actually stop something and look at it that we started becoming obsessed with positions and moments in time.
Oh, that's interesting because I just jotted some notes down. So some of the things I want to talk about, and one of them was swings versus skills, right? Because I know
Yeah.
that you're very much into measuring stats, and you listen to. I think I mentioned it in the thing yesterday that if you listen to some of these really great players talking, they're talking about shots in the end of the day, right? So
Yeah.
that's an important thing.
Yeah, I think you start kind of looking at golf in terms of the way it's played. It's really just taking that one challenge at a time. Okay, off the first tee, what's the challenge, right? So the challenge is I've got to take this golf ball and I got to put it in play out there in the fairway someplace, or into some area that I think is going to be give me the best chance to shoot the lowest score. And I just keep doing that. So each one of those tasks is actually each one of those shots is a task. And so if you, I think the idea of at some point in time making sure that you're getting some task training in
Right,
is really the only thing I found that really makes anything transferable from
right.
practice to play.
Brent Wiesberger just joined us. He's working with Stuart Morgan. Kevin, have you heard of Stuart?
Absolutely, yeah,
He's been doing some great work, and he does great
absolutely.
podcasts and what have you as well. He always gives a lot of value for money. So he's going to be joining us for the ultimate golf lesson to talk about some of that. So
Yeah, yeah. I think it'd be a good value for sure. I think anybody that's hasn't heard his stuff before, I think it's definitely worth a listen. He's a bright guy and does great work. So
yeah, there's such a nuance, right? I mean, you can look at a spectrum in pretty much any part of what we're doing and say, well, you need to know about anatomy. Do you need to be the world's leading expert? Probably not. You know, you need to know about motor learning. Do you need to be the person doing the research and being the world's leading expert? Probably not. But there is, so many kind of strings to our bow, as it were, uh, that we do need to go down these different paths and learn enough about the human and how to interact with them. Which to I didn't really do an introduction, but this is what I'm really impressed with you about is over the last, how old are you? Like,
be turning 60 this year. So
oh, I thought you were going to be like 39. So over the last 40 years, you've chosen to go down all these different rabbit holes. So, just to kind of give it some context, how do coaches learn? Well, a lot of it is, self-driven work, right? Um, so we teach as you do, and you get frustrated that, what seems to be the common opinion out there is not really getting the results that you want. And as a conscientious human being, you say, okay, you know what, I'm going to read something else, or we get inspired by somebody else, right? And so I think the effect I want you to have on the people listening and the golf industry is that they understand that if you want to be a great coach, probably of anything, then understanding all these different tentacles of the game are really good. So why don't you talk about some of the big influences outside of golf swing theory that have kind of made the biggest impact on you?
Yeah, I think I came out of I ended up in the coaching business from a failed player. So I entered the golf instruction space with a fairly high golf IQ. I'd taken a lot of lessons. Mike Adams had helped me a lot with my swing, and I'd had
Right.
help from some really bright people, and thought a lot about it, and pushed myself to a point where got to the end of my rope in terms of a player. So as I exited playing and started moving into coaching, I started looking at trying to figure out, okay, if I let's just scratch it all off the table and go and just start trying to look at it trying to understand what I'm seeing, right? So I had swings that I liked in terms of the way they looked. I loved the way Nick Faldo swung the golf club. I loved watching Seve. I loved watching Mac O'Grady hit it. I mean, so I had a lot of people that I admired the way they moved, and a lot of these things look very different to me. I mean, although there's some similarities, there were some clear differences. So, trying to develop an approach that would allow me to understand how all those things could conceivably work was really what started me down my path. And so, with that, that was the boat that took off the dock, right? As I started coaching. So
Right.
I became very interested in a lot of different things. I mean, I had a pretty good background in terms of the golf geometry and the physics by the time I got started. But things I didn't know much about were how people learned. I didn't know much about anatomy and physiology. I didn't know much about a lot of things. And so my curiosity started leading me down these rabbit holes, so to speak. And so some of the stuff that really made a big difference for me was really kind of getting off the anatomy and physiology. I took an online course with a guy named Leslie Kaminoff, who wrote a book called Yoga Anatomy.
Nice.
It absolutely changed the way I mean, it really gave me a real thorough understanding. I'd been around some good physical therapists at the time, and I had a decent understanding and at least a language I could speak with them. But it wasn't until I really got off and studied how the body moves and really took kind of a deep dive off into that. That was one of the things that really changed my world as a coach. And if you haven't done it, really taking a hard look at that and jumping off into that space is something will definitely benefit you. I know it benefited me. It allows me to, when I see things, and it shifted me over from working so much from technique to really focusing more on movement, because it clearly is about movement. It's so understanding how the body moves, understanding what it likes to do, what it doesn't like to do, and then how it adapts around things once things are, it has its own inherent challenges, how the body can adapt and move around things. And so, and I know that's the work that you and Mike have been doing is really trying to understand, making allowances for that. I think it's clear that people's bodies move differently. And I mean, if you don't believe it, go watch people walk down the street. I mean, every one of them is walking differently.
That's right. That's right.
And but yet they're all walking, right? So
that's right.
So I do think that it's important to acknowledge that inherent difference in human beings, and our job is to really understand that and try to figure out within the context of how they move and what their natural limits are. How can I help this person? And
well, I think
there's more things you can do to mess them up than to help them, really, if you're not careful. So
that's right. Well, I think the interesting thing is, we're always moving around in space of almost within a decision tree, and your point there is true, right? So one of the notes I've got down is kind of the relationship between technique and playing and skill, right? And if you think about walking as a metaphor, potentially you could have a team of experts which you're used to having, and you're just standing on the edge of the range saying, wasting time a little bit. And then you go, oh, look at that guy walk. I could really make his walk look better, right? But, would it improve his ability to get from A to B, at 2 miles an hour, right? And so that's always the, in the end, as a coach, you're the point man, you take responsibility and accountability for the change. We could potentially make that person, walk beautifully, but would it change the outcome? And would we actually, in some level, disrespect the way that they naturally are designed to walk anyway, right? And so that really is actually a really good encapsulation of what we do on a daily basis, right? And then they go, yeah, but I want to be the best walker in the world. What does that mean? Well, in this case, go from A to B faster, right? And so, well, rather than just changing the walking style, how do we get you to go from A to B faster is really the question. It's not just necessarily let's make your walk look nicer, right? And so I think that's a really cool evolution I feel that technology has brought into golf, is that, we're able to measure the outcome, we're able to measure the things that create the outcome, and then we're able to make decisions within that kind of, decision tree, which, potentially are outcome based, which at the end of the day, especially teaching tour players is outcome based. But, you've done a great job of developing players as well, which is kind of what I wanted to hear about. But in terms of, how do you, when they come in, obviously it's a little bit more technique heavy early on, but as you go through time, obviously, maintaining that and kind of making those decisions of, do we go and hit more shots? Do we keep playing? So talk about how you kind of bring somebody into your system. Somebody's like, oh, hey, you did some great work with these guys. They became tour players, and I just got to. Sorry, I'm getting trolled by Nick Getty here. So, yes, Nick, that was probably true, but I can't really say it in public. So anyway, so talk about how, how, let's call it like different spectrums. You bring someone in, a little bit more technique heavy, or, potentially practice heavy. How do you manage, like, over the course of 1 year with the elite level players that you work with? How do you manage your decision-making tree week to week, month to month, year to year sort of thing?
I think it's really, having some systems in place to be able to manage that. But it first starts with really being able to get to know that person, try to figure out exactly what their intention is, and making sure they're really clear on that, because the intention is what drives the truck. So if somebody walks in my office and says, hey, listen, I want to be a tour player, well, that's not enough for me. I mean, I need you to be clear. Do you want to be a top 50 player in the world? Do you want to be, top 100 on the FedEx? Let's figure out exactly what that means, because the benchmarks that go along with that particular level are very specific to that level, right? So once you figure out what the intention is and where they're trying to go, you can benchmark it out, and it becomes pretty easy. The next part is once we get the intention set, get the benchmark set, the next part is screening to that. Okay, what are we doing well? What needs work? And then what's the plan? And my thought about it is to try to do a couple things. Try to, first off, particularly with good players, do the least invasive thing possible to help them, right? So it becomes less of because a lot of times it's not as much as we think it is. And then the second part of it is just really trying to kind of make sure that if what they're doing is going to cause them physical harm, then I have a duty of care to try to at least inform them and make them aware of that, and make sure that we're clear on that, hey, listen, I think what you're doing here could potentially cause you some long-term harm, and we need to make a decision about how we're going to manage that. Are you happy with letting that go? I don't want to be party to something, that I didn't say, that I didn't bring to your attention early, and then 3 years down the road you say, well, why didn't you tell me? So,
right.
From there, it's all just periodization, just all classical periodization that you would learn from Tutor Bompa, in terms of being able to kind of put together a program based on, okay, we have some things, we need some time to adapt to some things. Well, we need to block off some time for that. We need a kind of a pre-season to kind of test it, and then we have an in-season where we're trying to optimize performance. And so I do use periodization, with all the players that I work with. And so it's really just trying to kind of follow the practices of the long-term development people that have shown us that, hey, listen, if you sit down, you can figure out what the intention is, establish benchmarks, screen that, and then build programming around that. and you could just stick to those basic things, you should be able to move that person down the track. And so that's basically what we do.
That is such great intelligent advice. Hey, do you personally write programs, weekly, monthly for the players,
Uh,
or is it you have it in your head when you go there and you go, I'm going to have these things, or so are you both kind
so
of on the same page,
so
or
we sit down once a year and we actually put together a plan for the year. Okay, what are the projects? And we have only a couple projects with each player, and then we have all the benchmarks that are set, and then we start with, okay, we've got our off season here. We've got maybe a month or so to kind of start getting some of these things in place, and then we write the specific kind of practices and training for them as they go. So one of the
right?
problems that I think particularly elite players are potentially I don't know. I guess they can potentially get themselves in trouble is overworking, right? They start trying
Absolutely.
to overwork and trying to do too much work. So we also try to make sure, okay, we set time limits and make sure that we have a chance to kind of get a very specific block of work done each day that really allows them to continue to maintain the things they're trying to maintain, do whatever work that they need to do, and and that changes a little bit as you go from preseason to in season to off season. So just but trying to make sure that they get their work done with a certain time period each day, so that they don't end up with this the negative neural consequences that end up kind of creating neural fatigue and some of the other things that impair
CNS,
performance.
yeah, CNS fatigue. So we have a guy, Mikhail Matson. He's one of the world's leading experts on that particular subject, who's going to speak at the winter workshop, and I'm going to try and get him on here as well. So it's interesting. I was talking to Bryson a while ago, and he was using with a quad, and he was pounding it at whatever 198, and at some point the speed started to go down, and historically we'd always say, oh, okay, so he's losing his speed component of his power. So I say, hey, Bryson, do you rest now? Do you wait until you kind of got your your energy back up, as it were? And he's like, no, man, I'm pushing through it. So it's almost like he's taking a different approach of pushing through that versus to your point, making sure that the players are well rested. I mean, even the emotional stress of contending or not contending, missing cuts or contending on two ends of the spectrum each given week. How do you guys measure that? Is there any physiological metrics that you pay attention to, or is it more just kind of performance based?
So I think that you can keep an eye on the performance. That's probably the easiest way to do it. But I do think the kind of the heart rate variance stuff is probably the best tool we have currently. I think I got off. Simon Webb and I tripped off into that way about at least 10 years ago, and
Yeah,
that was really the beginning of my understanding that I was overtraining my athletes. And we ran into some guys that were down that road. At that point in time, I didn't know anybody that was doing anything about it, and they helped us understand that this heart rate variance is probably going to be your best tool to recognize when somebody's starting to kind of go into that neural fatigue, and then how much sleep and recovery they need to bounce back from that. And everybody's a little bit different. There's also, when you start hitting balls back to back like that, there's going to be a reduction in speed just because of the ATP and the ability to kind of
right,
recharge that. So if you're looking to
right.
try to keep the speed up, then there has to be some rest in between those explosions. Because golf is an explosive motion
Yeah,
by
well,
nature.
that was my opinion. I was interested to see that from Bryson. Says and Rory almost said the same thing. He's like, I'm getting 195 ball speed, but I'm borrowing it, right? So it's like I can get it, like any of your players, you could possibly have them max out their club head speed, but for them to, in the future cruise at it, they have to train for it. It's an interesting thing that I'm definitely not qualified in that physiological space. So I think TBD for
No,
me.
well, I think one of the things that's pretty clear is that speed's a neurological function, and so just adding muscle mass won't do it. You have to train the nervous system to be able to move fast.
Right,
I think certain people have different are more capable of doing that than others. I mean, Jonathan Vegas was when they'll never forget when the first launch monitor we ever had. We had the Vector launch monitor. I was
I
so
remember
excited
that.
about it.
Yeah,
And
right. I
so
remember that.
when we first got it, we're out there hitting some golf balls and had all the kids kind of coming out, and Bronson Burgoon was there, and Bobby Gates was there, and a couple of other kids that were training with us at the time. And these were all really elite college players, and they could. So we had them come up there and do some repeats, and they were probably 110, 115, about 115. And I said, okay, now I want you to really send one here and see what happens. They could all move at 2 to 3 miles an hour faster. So
Right.
Jonathan's over there on the side of the range, just kind of hitting some golf balls. And I said, come over here. And he's, no, I don't want to come over there and do that. I said, just get over here and do it. So he came over and he's cruising at 120. And I said, all right, JB, let's send one. He went to 135. And so
Unreal.
I almost swallowed my tongue. I'm like, I couldn't believe it. I never seen anybody move it that much faster. So DJ's got that type of gear where he can just move it
That's
faster.
right.
And some of that is just is wired into his brain. I mean, some of it's just a they say if you want to be an Olympian, choose your parents wisely, and I think there's
That's
some
right.
genetics involved, right? So
Absolutely. Yeah, no,
yeah,
that's what we see. We're able to get some pretty profound clubhead speed changes during our lessons. Using all the different technologies. But everybody has kind of a glass ceiling, which is very hard to
and the other thing
without sustained effort to get beyond.
And the other thing is, what price are you paying? In terms of so you gain speed, but what's the price you're paying? I mean, are you hitting the rough more often? You can't find the center of the club face, or are you potentially kind of making your body hurt? So everything's got a price. You always have to just weigh out the price before you start trying to move too far down a track.
Well, that's right. Golf's kind of this Venn diagram, right, of all these different pieces that all cross over in the middle, which indicate better scoring. So which comes back to kind of one of the comments I made to myself before was, better golf is like it's almost the same as what is fitness, right? So what is fitness to anybody? Well, it kind of depends which coach you go to. So one coach, it might be, having big pecs. Another coach, it might be able to run a marathon. And so I think what you do a really good job of is defining what is a fitter golfer in terms of fit for purpose, right? And obviously the work that Mark Brody's done has given us a really solid foundation of understanding what it is that makes the game, right? How much do you talk to the players about that sort of thing statistically? I mean, that would be like a start of the year thing, and then you just create the program, or
yeah, I mean, I think one of the big breakthroughs that I had, I mean, the two big breakthroughs I've had probably in the last, I would say, I don't know, 5, maybe 10 years, are really this neural component that we talked about earlier, kind of the heart rate variance and
right,
working within their limits. How much work can they withstand? That was a big breakthrough for me. And the other part was really just starting to understand golf data and analytics. What actually moves the needle? How good is good?
right.
I didn't know what good was. I mean, I left golf
Exactly.
because my perception of good was so skewed that I thought I was supposed to be able to hit the ball in the fairway 90% of the times, 90% of the greens, and that's completely unrealistic, right? So, the tour player, 70% of the fairway, 70% of the greens. And so I started kind of looking at, analytics. I spent some time around Stuart Leong. He's got a company called Shots to Hole. He's just a brilliant guy. He changed my world in terms of the way I think. And I started using a lot of those analytics in terms of making my decisions. First thing I found out is, people were actually, they were really good at enough things. We could figure out what they were already good at. We could define good. And then the next step was, okay, if they're not good, how much better they need to be? And the stuff I liked about Stewart's stuff is he could quantify if you manage this delta, if you close that gap, this is how much better your score is going to be. Because sometimes there's things are happening that we're seeing that we think, okay, well that's clearly got to change, some sort of analytics value that we don't like, but it doesn't move the needle. So if it doesn't move the needle much in my world, I don't pay much attention to it. I mean, I know it's there. I mean, I'm aware of it, but it's like, what is going to move the needle here? What's going to truly make a difference? Okay, so if chipping the ball a foot closer is going to improve the player's score, half a shot around, that's 2 shots a tournament. That's, in my mind, that's moving the needle, right? If improving so I mean, I think that's. I use that stuff in that specific way, and I'm not too concerned about statistical values that don't move the needle. I mean, there's a ton of stuff that they measure out there that's kind of irrelevant. Okay, but there are things out there it's it's
Yeah.
about what we're talking about is trying to kind of find things that are relevant, right?
Well, that's right. I mean, they measure every single variable possible. I think Mark Sweeney did a really good job over the last couple of years with his program Gameforge, because for the similar way to what Stuart did, I think they're saying, okay, what is the number one stat that moves the needle, and going down the list. So
Yeah, and I think and Mark is that the Game Forge stuff is brilliant. If you have, for those of you watching, if you haven't seen it, you need to look at it. It's a very simple, practical. I mean, the thing I like about Mark anyway, he's the smartest practical guy I know. I mean, people are either like really practical, right, or really bright. But
right,
he's like got this combination where he's got this intelligence that's frightening how smart he is,
yeah.
and then he turns around and makes it so practical, and you can break it down to the most simple simple elements. I love that about Mark, and he did a really nice job with that tool.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the group of people that we hang around with is it's very we've come a long way. We've learned a lot, and it's very hard to listen to someone talk for a long period of time about something, for me, who doesn't link it back to like you said, better score, or easier way to help someone's golf swing or whatever. I apologize about the video. My internet is not great.
Yeah,
So
great.
uh, my next question is, one of the reasons I want to have you on is to do exactly what you just done for the last 30 minutes and explain, what it really is to be one of the world's leading coaches. And, what is the bridge that people can have, when they come into the game? I think the perception of, people watching, golf teachers on the driving range at a tournament is that, there's always just swing changes going on. So how do people bridge the gap? I mean, what kind of avenues to learning are there to move away from the theory that, let's say, when Tiger Woods was struggling, everyone and their uncle could come online and say, oh, I could fix Tiger in 5 minutes and this and that. How do we encourage the younger coaches, to embrace, with curiosity, which is the trait which, all of the people I love hanging around with, like you, have. How do we go, okay, you need to learn anatomy. By the way, somebody did have the question of where would you recommend learning anatomy?
Yeah,
Anatomy, learning, practicing, which is a growing field nowadays with a bunch of people talking about that.
I would encourage them to kind of look up Leslie Kaminoff, Yoga Anatomy, and he's got an online course. It's
Right.
brilliant. So it's called the
Yeah,
Breathing Project, I think is what it's called now. He's just an amazing coach. Anatomy, physiology, super practical and super useful. So that's where I would go.
that's really cool. So when someone comes to you, what do you, so good reason to come and see you, very good performance coach, I think we put you in the bucket of these days. How long does it take you before you feel like you are really confident that you've got their attention, you've got the steps in place, you're kind of on the right path? How long does that kind of phase take?
I think it takes time to really get to know someone. I mean, when somebody first walks in the room, I mean, my job is to try to get caught up with their golf story. Tell me how this began. Take me through take me through it. I want to hear all the details. And because if I'm going to be able to help you, I need to know what's happened up to this point. Because what's happened up to this point is going to dictate their perception, the stories they tell themselves. And so part of being a great coach is being able to understand how to make sure that they're telling themselves the right stories, right? So,
Right.
and so we have to, and making sure that they bring the right culture to the table, so that when they are tested, they've got they're bringing the right qualities. And the problem is if you're not mindful about that on the front end, it's not going to show
Hmm.
up when they want to compete or train, or when they have to do it when it matters.
That's
So
right.
I do spend quite a bit of time helping them with their intention, being super clear on what it is you're trying to do. We talk about your culture. You're a warrior. What's your warrior culture? Let's make sure we get that clearly defined. And what are the qualities that you want to kind of bring to those moments? And then we got to focus on just making sure that I know you well enough to understand what stories you tell yourself, and then when you get under the pump, to be able to kind of maybe help you change that script sometimes, right? So,
Sorry
so
about the
I'll tell you a clever
bad
story.
connection.
No, I'll tell you a funny story about
Mhm.
storytelling, right? So in 2018, we're at the Masters. Patrick Reed's showing up on site, and he's got a really bad head cold, right? So he goes to he plays on Thursday, plays nicely. He's got the last tee time on Friday. He goes home, comes to the golf course for a 2 o'clock tee time, shows up at 12:30. Looks like a train's run over him. He looked awful. So I said, well, how's it going today, bro? He goes, man, I feel terrible. I feel so bad. I said, okay. I said, well, what's going on? He goes, well, I've been fighting this cold. I said, well, did you get some sleep? He goes, yeah, I got plenty of sleep. I drank half a bottle of cough medicine, knocked myself out.
Right.
And my first instinct was to say half a bottle of cough medicine. I mean, you can't do that this week, okay? You can do that. You can do that next week, but you can't do that here. So that was my first thought. But instead of that, I knew we had to come up with a different story. So I said, okay, well, the good news is you got some sleep, so your nervous system's ready to go.
Right.
I said, the cough medicine is dehydrated. So I think probably if we get some hydration on board, you'll start feeling better pretty quick. You're gonna so we're gonna get some hydration going. Get your electrolyte drink going. I said when you get to the first tee, you get a big shot of adrenaline, and that walk up the first hill, you get some blood pumping. And by the time you get to the top of the first right at the top of the hill on one, you're gonna feel great. And so he buys into the story. Okay, I just made it up. All that's made up. I've got to make up something. But that's kind of part of what coaching is being able to get the right story in place and get a buy-in from the players so that they can manage what's happening in front of them, right? And then
that's the old three truths and a lie, right? I mean, as long as your three truths are solid and verifiable, then you have the luxury to bend the truth on a couple.
Yeah, so I think that some of that is being able to make sure they tell themselves the right stories, have the right culture in place, and then as we mentioned earlier, just having the clear intention set.
That's incredible. That's great stuff. What if you had like 5 books for a young coach to take him off the track of just watching swings on Instagram? What would they be? So you've talked about the yoga.
Yoga anatomy. I would make sure that they got off into that. I think they would have them read Tudor Bompa's Periodization. That's a really great book about how to do planning for sport. I would have them track down Istvan Bali's document that he wrote on long-term athlete development. I think it's called Trajectory. Was the last one that was put out.
There's a ton of Canadian, whatever sports department stuff that's based on his. There's a lot of that available for free on PDF online.
That's an incredible document. I mean, it's been my Bible for development for a long time, and I've had the luxury of being able to meet and spend quite a bit of time around Istvan. He's an amazing guy.
That's great.
As far as golf goes, I mean, I think is kind of going back in time. I think I would have him read Practical Golf. I think that's just an incredibly, I thought it was so beautifully written, and I know it's an old book, but I just think it's one of the coolest things ever. And Culture Code. I maybe have him read Culture Code. I think that's probably worth a read. So
that's cool. So you also work with, I watched your snippet video from when you became the National Teacher of the Year. So congratulations. Obviously, people that didn't know you before today can see how well deserved that is. How do you operate at Woodlands? Obviously, you're traveling somewhat. So someone comes to you from the club. Do you try and lean them towards a regular series of events so you can match your philosophy to the club level, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we've got a big organization here. The club I work at is the Woodlands Country Club. We have like 4,000 members, 5 courses. It's a big, huge place. We got 10 coaches running full time, and so that keeps everybody pretty busy. I have just a limited amount of kind of space where I can add people on. I do teach club members and people I've been teaching for a long time, so I don't teach exclusively tour players. But I also understand the commitment of being able to commit to somebody to help them with their learning. So we've done a pretty good job, I feel like, of educating our coaches here. So I'm pretty comfortable being able to let one of the other coaches kind of take these people. And I usually end up getting involved in the cases that are either super complicated, where somebody's, to try to unwind something that's really complicated, or just, something that just really fits my specific skill set, that I can really help with. And so We've got coaches here that are actually well trained and well qualified to be able to help
I
different
would,
types of people. So we try to steer them to the coach that can best serve them.
I would imagine your wife is very well trained.
No doubt about that. No doubt about that. I mean, she does.
Or
She's one of the best probably U13 coaches on the planet. I mean, I've never seen anything quite like it. So
that's really cool. So, so are you now involved with the PGA on some level in terms of trying to improve the educational system?
yeah, I've been on the committee there with their education system for off and on for the past probably 6 or 7 years. And I just think that it's I'm mindful that we have a responsibility to try to help this next generation of coaches. There's a lot of so when asked to do those things, I will do it every time. I just think it's such an important thing to be able to
Right.
to try to influence the thinking of that group of people, because that group whatever they come up with is going to be run down on top of the rest of the coaches. So trying to make sure that the right voices are brought to that discussion, and at least make sure that the people that are making the decisions have the right information to be able to make a decent decision about what to do. It's complicated. You got a big organization. You have a lot of different opinions, but I do think that continue to try to kind of just realize that we do have a responsibility to help that next generation of coaches and mentor this and make sure that the game continues to move forward.
That's right. Kirk, you're doing an unbelievable job, and you're one of my favorite coaches. If I was a tour player, I'd definitely come and see you.
That's kind of you to say, Terry.
Are you getting out and playing at all these days? Because you obviously were a very good player back in the day. You still enjoy playing?
I didn't play for a long time. I did get out during the COVID break this year and played quite a bit. I wouldn't say quite a bit, but I was getting out playing a few holes every day. I still love picking up the club and hitting it, but I just, the whole idea, I also recognize for me that, how much work it takes to go out there and train and be in form, and the idea of playing golf and not being able to do that doesn't resonate well with me. I don't do that well. So I do love the game. I love to kind of keep my hands on it. I still love the feeling of kind of rearing back and hitting one and hitting it out of the middle of the face, and kind of, all the great feelings that promotes. But I laughed. Somebody asked me the other day, said, "Do you play much anymore?" And I said, something? I said, if I never played another round, I played so much golf for so long that I got my fill. So.
And it's it's a different. I think Bobby Jones said it's tournament golf and recreational golf have nothing to do with each other. So having had that experience, it's a big difference, isn't it?
That's correct.
I was going to say something. I'll change my mind. So that's good. Karki, anything else you want to add to inspire our friends? I think what you said there before is actually interesting, because for some people, playing better means scoring better, but for a lot of people, it actually means enjoying the feeling of that solid hit on a regular basis, right? Yeah. And so that comes back to fitness. What really is fitness? I think the number of people that I teach that value one versus the other could almost be split down the middle, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think that's our job too in coaching, is to be able to sit down with somebody long enough to figure it out what is it they're looking for. So, and not to assume that just they've come to us and that we're gonna. I mean, it's really sitting down and trying to understand them and what's gonna make them feel better about their golf experience and keep them in the game, right? And for tour players, it's performance. But to your point, there's some people. I mean, I had a chance to work with Curtis Strange, and I sat him down, was having this big long conversation with him. He stops me in the middle of the whole thing and says, "Wait a minute." And he goes, "I've already beat all these guys." He's playing the senior tour at this point in time. "I've already beat all these guys. I just want to make sure when I go out, I hit it solid and have some fun." Okay, got it. That's a different story, right? Because I'm thinking he's want to try to. So you do have to take time on the front end to understand the person in front of you, to try to make sure what they're looking for, and then see if there's something in your toolbox that you can use to help them get there, right? That's it, right?
That's right. I mean, that's a two-way street, isn't it? I mean, people are also looking to be understood, right? I mean, they've changed coaches because they weren't being understood or they weren't getting results. Yep. And now they're looking for someone that either, is going to give them exactly the results they want, or give them the feeling that they're being heard, and So really, you've talked about, motor learning. We talked about, fitness, understanding anatomy. Any thoughts on resources for understanding how to understand human beings? Because it seems like that's an innate gift that you have.
Yeah, I mean, there's a group. There's a guy named Jerry Lynch that I've really kind of started spending some time around, and Jerry runs a group called the Way of Champions.
Hmm.
He's one of the most fascinating people I've ever been around. It just really
Hmm.
hangs out in the human performance space, but more from a mindfulness perspective. And I mean, I've learned so much from being around Jerry in terms of how to be as a coach. What does culture mean? And if I get stuck in that space at all, I mean, he's my first call. And
Oh,
so
that's amazing, because the high performing individuals in golf are unique, right? In terms of they really are individuals, versus in other areas you potentially have the weight of the team that you can use to potentially change behaviors. But in golf, it's such the player is really,
yep,
despite the team, on such an island. So
correct.
understanding
So
that is such an important skill.
no doubt about that. And I think that that was one of the things that Jerry helped me understand is how do you take some of this great information we get about team performance, culture in organizations, sporting organizations, business applications, and take that into an individual application. So and you can do it if it just needs to be thought out about how you're gonna bridge that. So I think Jerry Lynch, the Way of Champions, I think would be a good suggestion for anybody that wants to upskill themselves in that space. I mean, I love Jerry. He's just an amazing guy, and he's helped me so much. I can't even begin to tell you.
Well, you're an amazing guy. I think the important lesson I've taken from talking to you today is be really curious about humans, and
Yeah.
mentally and physically. Continue to learn, because you've studied all of these things, and these are intuitive reactions that you have at the right moment, right? So like the story you told us about Patrick, when he's having his cough medicine, you have enough experience about him, but also thinking about thinking, right, and thinking about how to deal with people and relationships, that you intuitively had a strong way to deal with that. And that's again, I think in our business, you just can't stop learning, and it doesn't end with understanding the TrackMan numbers or the force play numbers, and talked about Mike earlier. Mike has such an incredible timing, the way that he understands the person in front of him. And I remember Will Wu, the motor learning guy, watched Mike give a bunch of lessons, and he commented on how well he structured his lessons, and how good his timing was, and things like that. So I think going forward in the business we're in, I think people really have to understand the all-encompassing nature of being a coach of human beings, in addition to being a swing technician. And you're probably the best example of that I've seen out there. You and Stuart Morgan.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think that one of the things that I would tell you is that I believe that our steps forward in our sport, we are going to come by cross-pollinating with people outside of our sport.
Right.
I think that we have wrung out
That's
golf.
right.
We
That's
know everything
right.
we need to know. We don't need to know more. Okay.
That's right.
Every coach that's listening to this probably already knows enough to be a great coach. So the
That's
question
right.
is that how do you cross-pollinate and bring those things in? From outside of golf, whether it's other sports, other coaches, other leaders, whatever it is, and bring that stuff to the table, because that's the thing that's going to make us all better. Right.
That's right.
So I think the cross-pollination is where we need to be looking next for our next ideas to help us become better. And before we wrap up, I also just want to make sure that I thank you and Mike. I mean, you guys are such incredible guys. You're doing such incredible work. And, you guys have been so good to me. And I just want to make sure I publicly state that and let you know how much I appreciate both of you.
Well, Kevin, we appreciate you. And I think the other thing is, Mike and I talked about yesterday, was having mentors, right? And so if anyone ever has the opportunity to hang out with you, then they're going to, number one, they're going to learn some good stuff. But not only that, they're going to have a formula for continuing to learn for the next 10 years. Because even just talking today, they've got hopefully got some avenues to go down to continue to get better at what they do. So I appreciate your time. Thanks very much.
It's
awesome stuff.
You guys keep up the good work. Thanks for all the work that you do. And as always, if there's anything I do for you, you know where to find me. I'm on a pretty short leash. So.
You're the man. Thanks, Kirky.
All right.
See ya.
Peace. Bye.